And we're live, Mr. Jack Canfield. Welcome to the show.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Really excited to have you here, and especially right now with what's going on in the world. It's an interesting time, but at the same time, it's crazy. So, what are your thoughts right now? Where are you at with everything, and how's it going for you?
Well, first of all, I'm in great shape. I've been very healthy. I think I have a very strong immune system, so I'm not worried about anything like that. I'm 75, but at the same time, I eat a very healthy diet. I take a lot of things that everyone says are antiviral in terms of herbs and things like that. I live in a 3-acre estate that I've created. I grew up really poor, but because of Chicken Soup for the Soul and other successes, I've done very well. So someone once said, if you're sheltering at home right now in the lockdown, is your home a sanctuary or is it a prison? And for me, it feels like a sanctuary. I work from home quite a bit anyway, except when I'm on the road speaking, which has stopped. And all the seminars that we normally lead, I'm not leading. So I have a lot more free time. Fortunately, I had a book come out on March 1st called The Success Principles Workbook. And I think I've done 40 podcasts and radio interviews in the last 3 weeks. And so I'm sitting in this chair quite a bit. I have to get up every hour or so, move around, exercise at night and so forth. My wife's wonderful. We're eating really good food. Have enough toilet paper. So
Yeah.
it's all good. And I think the good thing too is we created a lot of online courses the last couple of years. So normally a lot of people I know, including myself, we've lost that speaking revenue. We've had to do some refunds for seminars. We've moved some into the future. We're doing some now virtually. But for me, life goes on, business is good. I haven't had to fire any staff. I don't plan to. Uh, when we had a recession in 2003, I think it was, and I had 5 staff at the time. I have 12 now. And we said, look, we either fire somebody or we all take a 20% pay cut. So it was. We all voted to take a 20% pay cut, including myself. So we got through it. We've also applied for an SBA loan, which we received for paying salaries for a couple of months. So that was good. Very fast to do that. Acting fast is really important these days. So we pivoted our business and life is good.
Yeah, that's amazing, and I love that perspective. What do you think? So right now with people, how can they? I mean, I'll just kick it off with this. How
Sure.
can people feed their soul right now in this moment? Because some people are going through worse situations than others. People like myself, I work from home as well, so it's pretty much the same for me. So I'm just kind of keeping and going my routine and all that.
Right.
What do you recommend for people to feed their soul right now?
Well, first you have to acknowledge that some people are dealing with difficult things. They've lost their job, they've been furloughed, their company had to shut the doors. There are people that have lost people. The CEO of my company lost his brother-in-law to COVID-19,
Wow.
and his sister-in-law is sick with it. His father-in-law is also sick with it. He's 94. So we'll see what happens. And I don't want to discount the pain that a lot of people are experiencing. I have friends that are doctors and medical care workers that are scared every day they go to work. They have to deal with the fact that they might get infected, bring that home to their children. So I don't want to make light of the situation at all. But I think if you are sequestered at home or whatever you're doing, feeding your soul is important. I think the biggest thing most people are doing is they're going into fear. And as I heard Bruce Lipton talk about the other day, he talked about whenever we go into fear, we create what are called the fight or flight syndrome in our body. In other words, all the energy goes to our limbs, our legs for running away from it, and our arms for fighting it. And it suppresses our immune system because fear originally was something you could deal with, like a tiger in the woods or an oncoming tribe of another tribe kind of steal your food or whatever.
Mm.
And you had to be able to fight. It didn't matter if your immune system was down, if you had a virus or you had a flu or you had a cold or you had a bacteria in your body, that was irrelevant if you did not run the tiger. So basically, when you go into fear now, we've got this pandemic, you can't see the virus, you can't really do anything about it. And so we just end up in this highly cortisol, adrenalized situation where our immune system is depressed. And you need your immune system to be strong right now. One of the things I've been doing is referring everyone to one of my friends named Dawson Church, who has a website called EFT Universe, EFT for Emotional Freedom Technique, the tapping technique. And he's developed a meditation called the Echo meditation, ECO meditation. It's about a 20-minute meditation that combines EFT tapping along with heart math, quick coherence breathing, and some light meditation. And the cool thing about this, not only does it get you calm, so the energy goes from your amygdala up to your prefrontal cortex, which is where you can think creative thoughts and also rational thinking as opposed to fear, but it also, the research now, 7 days in a row of this increases the immunoglobulins, which are the things that fight off viruses and bacteria, in your saliva. 113% increase. Now, the coronavirus has to come in through your nose or your mouth or your eyes, has to go through your throat to get into your lung. If your saliva is twice as strong to fight off viruses and things like that, you're going to be much more immune to not having that happen to you. So I think meditation is really important. I talk about the 5 M's: meditation and mindfulness, stopping every hour and just checking in. Do I need to stretch? Do I need to move? Am I scaring myself with my negative thoughts? Am I watching too much news? How am I feeling right now? And if I'm not feeling good, then do something that would make you feel good. And the things that would do that, number one is movement. Movement brings you into the present moment. All fear is created by imagining something in the future that hasn't happened yet. In other words, even if there was a snake crawling toward you in your studio, in order for you to be afraid, you'd have to go into the future and imagine that snake's going to bite you. And it hasn't bitten
Yeah.
you yet. So in the moment, everything's fine. And for
Yeah.
most people right now, everything is still fine. And you've got some food, you've got the toilet paper, you've got friends, you've got people you can talk to, you've got FaceTime, you've got, you can watch the 3rd season of Breaking Bad if you want to binge watch, whatever's there. We have lots of assets. But when we move and we're mindful and we move our body, which is the second M, is movement, what happens is movement brings you into the present moment. You see a lot of people out there now, they're putting things on TikTok and on Facebook where they're dancing. Friends of mine did a virtual dance party the other night. They had 40 people with their computers in front of them. They had a DJ. The music came on. Everyone danced. They were drinking wine, having a good time with each other. I'm not drinking at the moment because I think that depresses your immune
Yeah.
system, but
Same.
that's a choice people get to make. Um, so the second M is movement, and then music with the movement. Any music that uplifts you, that has positive lyrics, will feed your soul. So if you're watching the news and you're realizing another 25,000 people died, or this thing's happening, or it's breaking here, that's not that great for your vibration, for keeping you high. But if you're moving and dancing, or if you're in your gym doing kickboxing, or you're on your treadmill, or you're lifting weights, whatever it is, bring you into the present. The third M is mastery. Doing anything you're good at is going to bring you into high vibration. So when I play my guitar or play the piano, when my wife is oil painting, whatever, something we're really good at, when I'm writing, when I'm doing these podcasts and so forth, I'm high. And so doing something, getting better at what you're good at. If I'm online looking at a guitar lesson, I go online and Vince Gill teaches me how to play the guitar better. How much cooler could that be?
Yeah.
So basically that brings you into the present moment as well. And the other thing is meaningful communication. Being in communication, being authentically sharing with other people from your heart, not from what, a lot of people now are pretending they're not as scared as they really are. A lot of people are, but just be real with people, whatever it is. And if you do those things, they all bring you into the present moment, and that helps raise your vibration, as opposed to being in a state of fear. And I think reading uplifting literature, obviously the Chicken Soup for the Soul books, any of the self-help books that are out there that are there. There's so many videos on YouTube, so many people doing summits. I was just looking at Marie Folio being interviewed by Pete Varga, and she was talking about dancing, and she was talking about how, as entrepreneurs, a lot of us are afraid to be selling things right now because we're in a situation where we don't want to seem insensitive to the people who don't have money. But we're small businesses, and small businesses need to survive. And so we're modeling for people that it is possible to keep your business going in a time. Not everyone's going to be able to afford it, but the people who can, and we can do discounts for people, we can do giveaways, there's lots of things we can do. I remember my co-author for Chicken Soup for the Soul, Mark Victor Hansen, once asked the Dalai Lama, he said, sir, what's the best thing I can do for people that are poor, living in poverty? And the Dalai Lama said, don't be one of them. which I thought was pretty interesting. I didn't
Yeah.
expect him to say that. But he said, be a model that it's possible to live a life of abundance and prosperity, even in the midst of challenge and things like the pandemic that we're dealing with right now.
Yeah, I love all those, and I love how important it is to get into that vibration. That's why, I mean, I love these conversations, because by the end of them, I talk about it all the time. It puts me in this vibration of, it is a high.
Yeah,
It's a high. And if I do 3 of them in a day, I'm literally
exactly.
in that vibration all day.
I
And that
know, me too.
that
I've been doing,
compounds over time.
yeah.
It's like a life hack, you
It
know?
is.
It's
It is.
like,
I've been doing like 3 to 5 a day, and all of a sudden I start at 9. Next thing I know, it's like 5 o'clock, and I'm feeling really good.
yeah. Explain to us what vibration means, because I think a lot of people get it mixed up. I talk about this stuff all the time, but I would love to hear it from you, because some people say it's woo woo. Some people talk about, I don't know where people are at with it, but I find it so fascinating, and I would love your perspective on what is vibration.
Well, everything's vibrating. Your voice sounds different than my voice because it vibrates at a different frequency. You're able to pick up FM 89.1 on the dial versus 90.3 on the dial because there's a different vibration of a frequency of that radio station. And so music is a different vibration. The music of hip hop versus the music of Mozart and Bach, they have a different vibration. Basically, it's for humans, we experience it as a feeling. We either feel it in our body as a sensation, like someone hits you in the arm. You feel that vibration in your body.
Mm,
If you're happy, you get emotional vibrations versus anger. It's a very different vibe. We talk about a room with good vibes and bad vibes.
yeah,
The Beach Boys had a song way back when called "Good, Good, Good, Good Vibrations."
great
We
song.
walk into a room, we can say, "Man, there's bad vibes here." Walk into a restaurant, walk into a bar, walk into a party, you can feel it. And
Yeah.
so what does that mean? Everything we think and everything we say and do has a certain vibration to it. And it literally is a vibration like this. And the frequency is how fast does that vibration move per second, how many times it go up and down. And then there's a amplitude, like how high is that vibration? And our heartbeat's a vibration, our breath is a vibration. And so basically, we want to be in what we call a high vibration. Well, feelings like love, joy, gratitude, forgiveness, compassion, when we're in service, those are very high vibrations. It's why we're attracted to people who are funny, attracted to people who are loving, compassionate, and gentle, kind, or people that have a high vibration like Tony Robbins because they're enthusiastic, they're alive. The word enthusiasm is an interesting word. I don't know if you've ever heard this, but the word enthusiasm comes from the Greek en theos. So in theos, meaning theology is the study of religion. Theos means God in Greek. So the more God that comes through you, the more spiritual energy that you're vibing out, the
Oh.
more enthusiastic you are. So someone who's like, they're not very enthusiastic. There's less spiritual aliveness in them
Mm,
than there is in someone who's really excited. I tend to be more calmer than I am jumping around and hitting my chest like Tony or someone like that.
yeah.
But my vibration is very high because I live in a state of joy, in a state of love, and a state of gratitude all the time.
Yeah, I love that. And anyone that's followed your work for a while, you can see that you have this nature to you, this calm vibe, but like something good is going on there, and
Yeah,
you can
yeah,
appreciate that in people too. And I noticed that in a lot of successful people, even people that live a long time, they just have this peace. They don't seem stressed. They
right.
really just have this aura to them.
Well, when you realize that, well, it's two things. I'm 75 years old. So one of the things that
You look
happens
great,
for,
by the way.
thank you, thank you. Most people think I look 10 to 15 years younger than I
Yeah.
am, which I think biologically I probably am. I mean, I've been meditating since I was in my 20s. I've been taking supplements. I take about 40 to 50 pills a day to
Wow.
supplement all the things that our food that's being grown not as well as it used to be don't give us anymore. I use essential oils, which I've gotten really into lately. The cool thing I learned just this last week is every essential oil has a different frequency, different vibration we
Oh,
were talking
really?
about. And I just learned yesterday talking to somebody that you can put certain oils on certain parts of your body because they actually support the functioning of those organs, like your heart, your brain, your liver, your kidney. And there's a there's a company called what's it called, Young Living, that has this essential oil called Thieves. This blew me away. This is so cool for the coronavirus. During the plagues back in Europe, there was a group of people who never got sick, and they were thieves. They were the people going into people's homes and robbing their homes when they were sick because they couldn't fight back. And the king said, these people never get sick. Let's go capture them and find out why, because we're losing too many people. Turns out they were all from like the Middle East, and they all had more spices in their food, things like cardamom, things like cloves, things like cinnamon, things like that. And so this one company has put all these different essential oils that are based on these foods, these plants, and so people that are taking these Thieves essential oils aren't getting sick. And so it's fascinating when you think about it, that our body can be influenced by a vibration, whether it's a word that we hear, a sound we hear, a thought we think, a color we see. Every color has a different vibration. We
Mm.
know, for example, that if you go into a hospital, almost every emergency room, when you come out of the operating room into where recovery, it's a light green wall. Well, what's the color of nature? It's green. What does your cat and dog do when it's sick? It goes out and eats grass and throws up. It's getting green vibration. What are we told to eat all the time? Green drinks, green smoothies. So the color red, put your red shoes on, red lipstick, our lips swell up, our vaginas swell up and get red when we're excited.
Yeah.
The with fire trucks are red. So all these colors have a vibration to it. One company, they found that people were hanging out around the water fountain too much. Read a book by a guy named John Ott, who was the color expert for Disney. And they said, if you don't want people to hang out around your water fountain or your room where the microwave is and all that, paint it orange. People do not like to hang out around orange that much.
Really?
Yeah, if it's a bright orange, they won't stay there. And we also know, for example, that blue is a color that makes people feel like you're an authority. Um, Olive makes people trust you. If I wear an olive shirt, people trust me. If I want to if I'm going to the banking world and I'm talking to bankers, I'll wear a blue suit, white shirt, maroon tie. These are power colors. So every color is sending off a different vibe. Today, most people I talk to, like you, are all wearing black t-shirts, black shirts, black sweatshirts, whatever. It's kind of the color of the age right now. Uh, and then it sends a certain vibe out.
Yeah.
So anyway,
That's
vibration, we talked a lot about that, but everything is a vibration. And the most important point of this all is that when you were in a high vibration, you attract other people. If Robin Williams were still alive and he walked into a party, the entire group would walk over because they'd want to hear Robin. He'd make us laugh. We'd feel high. Humor's something that raises a high vibration. If the Dalai Lama walked into a room, we'd all want to go over and be in his energy. This is really cool. We have I live in Santa Barbara, California, and UCSB has a Tibetan Studies department. And when the first big grant was given, they did a fundraiser in Santa Barbara, and the Dalai Lama came, and there was a big party in Montecito where Oprah lives, not at her house, but in that same area. And the Dalai Lama stood near a rose bush when he was giving his talk. And a couple of months later, the rose bush dropped all of its thorns. It was the only rose bush with no thorns. That somehow
whoa.
thorns are protective. And when you're around the Dalai Lama, there's absolutely no need to be protected. And so these thorn bushes were actually affected by the Dalai Lama's energy. I mean, that's just outrageous when you think about it.
Wow.
Yeah, very wow.
Have you met the Dalai Lama?
I have not met him personally. I've been invited to meet him several times, but it's never worked out. I met a couple of his students who were amazing. I met a guy in India last time I was there who was a student of Sai Baba, who was this guy who could go like this and drop rings into your hand that fit you, and do that and drop one into your wife's hand that fit her, and be wearing a t-shirt. So this guy who was a student, we were at a dinner and he took me out to the garden. We're talking and he's wearing a white t-shirt. And all of a sudden he says, put out your hand. He goes like this and he drops these mala beads into my hand out of nowhere. And I said, how do you do that? And he said, he said, well, well, it's taken me many, many years of meditation to learn to do that. It's called a siddhi, or a power. But basically, everything all exists in physical form, and it exists as an idea. And we take time for an idea to go into physical form. I think of a book, I write it takes me months, it gets printed, and I have a book. but these guys are able to just imagine something with so much power that they just literally physically create it in the moment. I don't know how to do that. I've never decided to take the time to learn, but it's pretty wild. And when you think about that, it tells us we all have the power to manifest anything. Probably going to do it a little less slowly in Indiana than you do it in India, but it doesn't matter. It's worth putting energy into learning the tools and principles of how to create the life you want.
Yeah, that it's very interesting. I'm glad you brought that up because manifesting is such a hot topic, but a lot of people get it mixed up. Especially I think a lot of people, with the law of attraction and the secret and all that, it works for some and some deny it, some say it's not. Like, where are people missing? What steps are people missing in manifesting?
Well, one thing we just talked about, and I know some very high people, meaning they sit in very high consciousness, and one of them said to me recently, a guy who runs something called the Bio-Cybernaut Institute, where he said, one of the reasons you manifest so quickly, Jack, is you are very high vibration. You live in a state of love. You've forgiven all the people that ever harmed you. And so when you intend something, it has a lot of force behind it, a lot of powerful attraction. Um, and so it's I don't know how to say this. I don't have a good metaphor for it, but when you're in a high vibration where you don't have limiting beliefs, we all have limiting beliefs. I still have limiting beliefs. I mean, I just did a seminar recently where a guy was taking us back to some place we felt stuck in life, and again using essential oils to facilitate. This is cool. We're going to talk about two things here.
Perfect.
When you smell an essential oil, it stimulates the olfactory nerve, which goes from your nose past the amygdala into your hippocampus where memory is. So like, let's say a veteran, and he's got a memory of watching his buddy blow up with an IUD in Afghanistan. And every time he hears a sound or hears something or sees something, it triggers that memory. If you take an essential oil like rose or thieves we talked about earlier, lemongrass, peppermint, whatever, and you're smelling that at the same time, that creates a positive feeling. Now the positive feeling is sitting right next to the negative memory, and it dissolves the negative feeling associated with the negative memory. Now it becomes a neutral memory. Like, I never studied Scientology, but I know people who do, and the basic thing they have you do is talk about something over and over and over and over until it becomes like, oh, I put my shoes on last night. And the idea being that you want to get to a place where even watching your parents in an automobile accident becomes something like, I watched the news today, or I saw my father, slice up a pumpkin. So the point being that we now know there's ways to really quickly facilitate getting rid of these limiting beliefs and these negative fears. So anyway, I got rid of one of mine recently is what I was about to say. So it's fear and limiting beliefs that lower your vibration, along with anger, resentment, and guilt and shame, things like that. So the more you can release those things through processes like tapping, like NLP, like therapy, like aromatherapy, which we just talked about, there are many ways to do it, then the more you're a pure channel, and the faster things can manifest through you because there's no resistance. It's resistance that creates the problem. If we have a huge, what should I say, tube, water's flowing through, it all works. It's fine. But recently, we had a drought in California, and a lot of my trees were growing around the pipes underneath my house. And eventually, one of them broke the pipe, went into the pipe, and all of a sudden we see these roots coming up through our toilet on the first floor bathroom.
Oh,
And all of a sudden the toilet's not flushing because there's a block. And so, we can't you're not manifesting through that channel, as it were. And so we have the same thing in our mind, in our consciousness, and we have to remove the blocks, which are the fears that come from imagining terrible things happening in the future. So you want to replace that with positive expectations. We do that through affirmations, visualization. Want to release our limiting beliefs, which we talked about in many ways to do that. Forgive people so we're not carrying that anger around. Because if I'm angry at you, I'm pushing my hands out. I'm blocking your energy. I don't
mm,
like you. When I'm doing this, I can't receive anything. I need my hands to be like this to receive. So when I let go of my anger, I let go of my resentment, then I'm available to receive that which I want to bring in. There's less static in the system, if you will.
mm.
So that's why I think So many people, they may do the things that they read about in the Secret, or they see the movie, or they read the law of attraction books that are out there. But the reason they're not manifesting is they have these limiting beliefs, fears, resentments, and so forth. So in my book, The Success Principles Workbook, for example, there are lots of exercises on how to release those limiting beliefs, replace them with positive beliefs, forgive the people you need to forgive, and so forth. It's just one aspect of it, but there's a lot of that in the book.
Yeah, having the workbook is key too. I remember when I needed that for Think and Grow Rich too, the workbook
Hmm.
to kind of go through, because there's so much, and a lot of it is you got to write stuff down. You got to go through it.
Yeah.
So really, because like, how many people just read a book and then they don't do anything with what you kind of goes in one ear and out the other, right? It happens all the time. You got to do something. So having a workbook is key.
Yeah, well, you mentioned Think and Grow Rich. My mentor was a man named W. Clement Stone, who was a good friend of Napoleon Hill. In fact, they co-authored two books together.
Mm.
One was called, I wrote over here, it's called Success Through a Positive Mental Attitude. And W. Clement Stone said, you don't want to end up with shelf esteem. You got all these books you've read, they're just sitting on the shelf, but you haven't actually done anything with them.
Mm.
And so it's the doing this. I almost called my Success Principles Workbook. I was going to write it. The title is called "Don't Read This Book." And the reason I wanted to do that was I didn't want people to read it. I wanted them to do it. So it's a book to
Oh,
work
smart.
through. And as you kind of intimated, there's a lot of worksheets you fill out. There's questions you go through. There's a series of questions that if you answer them, you start to have aha experiences. You begin to realize, oh, that's how I'm blocking myself. That's how I'm keeping myself stuck. And then how do I get through that? What's the opposite of that? And so the reason I wrote the workbook was that people had read the Success Principles book, and sold over 1 million copies in
Yeah.
47 languages, I think now.
Amazing.
But the fact is that a lot of people weren't doing it. And I noticed the people that went through our coaching program, the people that took our live seminars, their lives were transforming. They were doubling their income in a year, doubling their time off, losing weight, getting out of terrible marriages, producing, writing their book for the first time, starting a podcast, whatever it might be. And so I said, could we put our coaching program between the covers of a book? So if people just did each exercise as they go through the book, they would end up getting the same results that people that went through our coaching program. So we actually tested that with 30 people who had never been exposed to my work, just gave them the workbook in a manuscript form, said, do this for, a couple of months, come back. And the results were phenomenal. So we know it works.
Mm. It should almost be a prerequisite when you read a book, right? It should almost be that sort of that having to go through it. I mean, it's part of this, the part of
Yeah.
learning.
Yeah. Well, if I ever write another book in the future, which I am right now, I'm writing two actually.
Oh,
There's
wow.
going to be workbook pages in the book,
Yeah.
so the book will be combined with that uh, in order to make people. In fact, there's several places in my book where it says, if you're still reading this, it means you haven't done the form on the previous page. Stop, go back,
That's awesome.
things like that.
Okay, so I want to ask you about becoming an author, because this is a question coming from me, and I know there's a lot of people who want to write books and become
Sure.
one. And this keeps popping up with me, people approaching me to write a book or different things. And I'd love to know, how does somebody go and write a book, and how do they write a book that's actually going to be, you know, monumental or a bestseller like yours? Like, how does
Mm-hmm.
walk us through a bit of that journey with you, because I know it wasn't always easy for you when you became an author.
Well, I think you first have to have something to say. What is it you want to say?
Mm.
And my first book was a book of self-esteem activities for teachers back in 1976. And I had been teaching that for probably 5 years. So I had an experience of what worked and what didn't work. So I was coming from experience. When I wrote the Success Principles, I had been applying these principles to my life. As you can see behind me, a lot of books. I've read 3,000 books. And, that's about I was reading a book a day. It only takes 10 years to read 3,000 books if you do that. I took a speed reading class in college
Wow.
and realized that, learning was critical, and if you could learn quickly. And then what you learn eventually is most of the books you read now in the self-help world, 50% of it you already knew because it's in there. There's certain principles that are basic. You can kind of skim through those. And then there's new stuff that's usable, a good story, a nuance, a new technique, whatever. Um, but the idea is make sure you've got something worth saying. And at the same time, I would say to someone like you and all your listeners, you don't have to write the groundbreaking book that's going to be a bestseller for the whole world. You may only have 20,000 followers, but if your 20,000 followers are following you because you have a certain vibration, a certain field you're in, a certain take on a field, a certain set of information you might have, then write for that group. And then if you want to write a best-selling book, it has to be universal, meaning it's going to reach a lot of people. So, for example, if you write a book for women, half the world's women. That's a big audience. With Chicken Soup for the Soul, it was anyone that breathes in and out that has feelings. That was a book that could relate to them.
Yeah.
Soup for the Teenage Soul. At any given time in America, there are about 19 million teenagers. So that's a large market. We sold 10 million books to that market
That
when
was the
we,
one I read in grade 9. I read Chicken Soup for the Teenage Soul. It was
yeah,
awesome.
there you go. And I meet a lot of people, make me feel very old when they go, yeah, I read your book when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But that's okay. The thing that you want to do is, now let's talk about how to write a book and then how to write a bestseller, because there's two different things here. One way to write a book is if you're giving talks, if you're doing interviews like this, capture that somehow, record it, have it transcribed. I use Rev, some people use Otter, doesn't matter, but you can send stuff off now and have it transcribed and get it back within 24 hours. A friend of mine named Lynn Twist has amazing stories. She's just an incredible storyteller. I said, Lynn, all your stories have to go in a book. She said, I don't have time to write a book. I don't know how to write a book. I said, here's what you do. You're going to come down to my house. I'm going to invite 10 or 12 of my friends over for 2 days. We're going to sit in my living room. You're going to sit on a bar stool. We're going to put a Mevo in front of you. We're going to record what you say. And we're going to send it off to Rev. And within a few days after you're gone, you're going to have all your stories back typed up perfectly.
Wow.
And we did that. So in 2 days, she generated a book. Now it's taken her a couple months to edit it and, resequence things and put in details she might have left out and so forth. But literally, it's a 2-month book project and she'll have a best-selling book. Another way is to have someone interview you. You might know a lot of stuff because you've interviewed so many people. You have your own field of expertise that you teach. You might not think you want to sit there and type it. You don't know where to start. Just have someone interview. So where'd you start? Why is it important? What are the steps? How do you do it? Now you have what I call vomit copy. You've got copy on paper that you can edit. The other thing is you can dictate it. We now have all these programs in our computers, our cell phones, where we can just sit and talk and it types. Is
Yeah.
it perfect? No. Would it take a few hours to edit it? Yes. Is it easier for some people to talk than type? Absolutely. So once you have what I call vomit copy, you've just vomited all the concepts you have onto the page. Some people like to outline, they use mind mapping. There's a lot of ways to play with it. I tend to think about what's everything I know about a topic, and then what is a story that illustrates it, what's a principle, what's a how-to, what's an action step, etc. And then I have the skeleton, then I go in and I write the book. Now, once you've got that done, the next step, if you want a bestseller, is you have to have at least 20 to 40 people read your manuscript and give you feedback. Robert Kiyosaki's last book, he asked, I think, 2,000 people to come online, read each chapter, and give him feedback. Now, two things are valuable about that. He got feedback from 2,000 people. This is what works. This doesn't work. I'm confused. You said that in chapter 1, whatever. He also had 2,000 people who were going to buy that book because they were part of helping create that book. We know from research that anything people help create, they want to purchase. They want to own what they helped create. So that was very valuable as well. With Chicken Soup for the Soul, we had a reader panel of at least 100 people for every book. Sometimes the same people, sometimes new people, depending on what the book was about. For Teenage Soul, we actually had one of our Teenage Soul books. We had a whole high school suspend classes for a day, and all the kids read Chicken Soup stories from this manuscript of 200 possible stories, and they graded them on a scale of 1 to 10. We then take an Excel spreadsheet, and we put all the people's names down, all the stories across, and every story gets graded. Then we look at the average score of each story. Anything less than a 9, we never published. So, if a story scored 8.2, well, it's nice, but it's not going to make it a bestseller. But if a story scored 9.9 or 9.8 or 9.7, it was great. And we learn, not every story is going to be 9.9. So you start with 9s and 10s, you end with 9s and 10s, because there's this concept called recency and primacy. When a person starts to read your book, you want them to go, this is incredible. I'm going to tell my friend it's a great book, and I'm going to keep reading. And then if you have some stories that are not quite as good, you put a few of those in, but you can't keep doing that too long. You have to have another 10. So it keeps riding along. And then is there humor in the book? You look at Chicken Soup books. If you remember, we had cartoons in those books.
Mhm.
So about every 5 to 10 pages, there was something to laugh at. If you're leafing through the book at a store, you see a cartoon, you immediately stop because you want to read the caption. And you get a positive identification with the book. Oh, this book makes me feel good. And so that's important. Stories. If you're writing a book, I had a guy who's writing a book on real estate investing. It was all theory and concept and stuff. I was running a bestseller retreat at my house for authors to show them how to write best-selling books. And I said, where's your story? There's no stories in here. People are moved by stories. That's what's going to make them want to read your book and believe you and would do the things you're teaching. And so if you look at the Success Principles book, even in the workbook, we put stories of people that have used that principle, and you go, oh, Steve Jobs did that and helped him. I guess that would help me. You know, this person that swam from, Diana Nyad, who swam from Cuba to Florida. You know, there's a story in
Yeah.
there about perseverance. I mean, she tried 3 times and failed, but then she came back again in her 50s and actually swam, 90 miles. So there's inspiration plus information plus motivation plus perspiration, which is the activity. When you
Yeah.
do all of that, then you're going to get success.
It's amazing how stories move people. It's
Yes.
almost like it goes back to our tribal days around the fire or something, getting read these stories. And as a kid, we're read stories. And it's fascinating because as adults, that's what gets us, that's what sucks us in. It's like that in marketing. Anyone that can tell a story and walk you through the journey that you feel like you're actually there, you feel like I'm just like this person. I
Yes.
know what they mean. They're a human
Yes.
too, just like me.
Yeah. Well, look at me. I started out, I grew up in West Virginia. My dad made $8,000 a year. It's 8 with 3 zeros. And I went to school on a scholarship. I graduated from the half of the class that made the top half possible. I went to graduate school on a scholarship. I worked my way through graduate school. I was a part-time teacher. I got a check for $129 every 2 weeks. Now my rent was $79. So it meant the first 2 months, 2 weeks of the month, I had to live on $50.
Wow.
So I was eating like these 21-cent dinners, which was contadina tomato paste, garlic salt, pepper, water, and 11-cent noodles. And today it would be the ramen noodle diet, but we didn't have ramen noodles back then. And I know what it's like to be poor. I took the bus to work. um, I would basically, when I got my second check, I would go across the street to an all-you-can-eat for $7.99 Italian place, and I ate a lot at night. And that was my one extravagance of the year. But for 2 years, I lived like that. It was my apartment was $79. It had a Murphy bed that came out of the wall. You sleep on it. Your clothes are hanging behind it. You put it back up. Now you can walk around the room. There was one table where I ate my dinner, graded papers for the kids, studied for school. I had a 2-burner stove, a little refrigerator like you'd see in a mini bar in a hotel, and a bathroom where you could hardly move around without hitting your knee on everything. So I know what it's like to be poor. And fortunately, I met a guy during that period of time who said, I want you to go to this lecture series with me. It was called The Living Philosophers. And there was a guy named Herbert Otto, who was the director of the National Center for the Exploration of Human Potential. And they were exploring things like fire walking and how much of your mind are you using, how many languages could you learn, et cetera. And he inspired me when he said, you're only using 10% of your mental capacity. I said, I want to use more. And he told me about some workshops I could take. And I went and took these workshops on personal development. It was my first exposure to it. Changed my life. I think I took the first year 17 workshops. I ran out of money. I started
Mm.
volunteering. Can I hand out Kleenex? Can I take tickets? Can I move chairs around before the seminar? And because I was so committed, they let me do that. And the next year I took 37 weekend workshops, and I started reading all these books you see behind me. My life transformed. And I went from making, I think the next year when I actually had a full-time teaching job, I was making about $18,000. And within 3 years, I made $100,000 because W. Clement Stone, my mentor, said, he challenged me. I want you to set a goal. You don't know how to do it. Just commit to it, visualize it, affirm it. The how will show up. And sure enough, it did. That's a story I tell in the movie, The Secret.
Yeah, I know. I love that. That's classic. So many people, it's so nice to hear those stories, those human stories,
Hmm.
right? In actual that actually happen. And that's because so many people think because somebody becomes successful that they're different or something. But everybody has had to, this is why I love, my show University of Adversity, because everybody's got to go through some sort of challenge and some sort of something so that they can learn and grow from and kind of look back and be like, this is the story. This is how I did it. And that
Sure.
inspires people because each one of those is different. And there may be something in each story that's like, they click, and it's I can relate
Yeah.
to that person. So that inspires me to step into my power, you know?
Absolutely. Look, I bankrupted my first business. It was a retreat center in Massachusetts, and we went belly up. I moved to California and was living very poor for a while because I moved out here. No one knew who I was. And but someone created this idea called a 1-year seminar. If you could get 100 people to pay you $30 a month, you'd have $3,000 income, which back then was plenty of money to live on.
Mm,
And so I got 100 teachers to pay $30, either to hear me or some other educator talk about how to build self-esteem in the classroom.
mm.
And so literally working 2 days a month to deliver that. The rest of the time I could write. That's when I started writing my books. And I've been through 2 divorces. The first one was a 5-year marriage. Never should have got married, but my self-esteem was so low that when I realized I shouldn't get married, I couldn't tell 250 people don't come to the wedding because they already had all their reservations. I got
Oh,
2 great kids out of it though. And my second marriage lasted 20 years. I lost half my wealth. I got to keep my job, as I say. They valued my business at about 13 million. And they took all the money and gave it to my wife, and I got to keep my business. So as I said, I got to keep my job.
yeah.
I was wearing my shirts 3 and 4 days in a row before I'd send them to the cleaners, wearing T-shirts underneath them so I could, wear them
Mm,
over and over. Um, but I built it back up again. And I would say this: every adversity, the great quote from Napoleon Hill, every adversity has within it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. I used to think when I got screwed in my marriage, the divorce, this is not fair and blah, 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 blah. Well, later, and I had offered my ex-wife, I said, I'll give you half of everything I earn for the rest of my life if you'll let me keep half of the money in the land and stocks and all that. And she said, no, I don't want to do that. And so she got, in my mind, pretty much everything. And, but, about 10 years later, we sold Chicken Soup for the Soul to a group in New York for, I mean, well over $60 million. I can't tell you the exact number because it's a confidentiality agreement, but I would have had to give her half of that. And which was way less than what I gave her when I got divorced. So every
wow.
adversity is actually an opportunity. And you look back on the marriage that failed and you go, thank God I'm not still with that person. Or that job you got fired from. I got fired from a job once, not rehired because I had a beard back in the 70s and they thought I was a hippie, and I wasn't, but I just like to have a beard. But they decided they weren't going to rehire me. So I know what that feels like. But because of that, I got a job. It was much better. Met W. Clement Stone, my mentor. So everything that happens to us, I always say, what's the opportunity that this is? What's the growth opportunity? And now I know I've survived everything that ever happened to me, and it's always turned out better. So now I just look for that. I expect that. It makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, I'm noticing that as well. You can't retreat. You got to lean into that because you know they're going to have a gift on the other side. There's always
There you
some
go.
sort of reward.
Yeah, exactly.
There always is. As much as it's uncomfortable, that uncomfortable feeling is going to be that much better once you get over it. Yet
Exactly.
we all want to be so comfortable all the time, and you know we retreat. And getting comfortable with that adversity and that challenge is something that I take pride on in my own life, because sometimes if I have this discomfort or why is this happening, instead of becoming the victim, I really trying to become empowered to the situation. Like, this is going to teach me something. I may not know right now. It's okay to feel it, but I know that this is going to move into something better.
That's right. Yeah, don't deny the feelings you're having. Have them,
Yeah.
but move through them, release them. Um, there's those 2 quotes that everyone's seen a million times now: everything you want that you don't have is just outside your comfort zone, and the other one is everything you don't have is just on the other side of fear. So if you're willing to step through the fear out of your comfort zone. A friend of mine was down in was it Ecuador? Yeah, Ecuador, in the rainforest, and they were on the side of a volcano down there, and the shaman said the problem with the people of the north is you're all addicted to comfort. And
Mm.
so think about it. We're addicted to comfort. We get upset when our air conditioner breaks down, or if, it gets too hot, uh, or if we have to go farther to get our groceries, or like we have to now distance ourselves 6 feet. We can't go through Whole Foods as fast as we used to. The line's longer, It's like, so what? It's like, no big deal. You just have to live with it. And I know that for me, the first talk I gave, my legs were shaking. I was holding on to a podium. If the podium hadn't been there, I probably would have walked off the stage, you know. And then
Yeah.
now you can't get me off the stage. I love talking. The first time I drove a car, I was really nervous. I was awkward. Now, no problem.
Yeah.
One thing I ask people to do a lot is just go ahead and fold your hands like this.
Mm.
Notice which thumb is on top. Is it your right thumb or your left thumb?
It's my left.
Okay. Now take it and fold it so the other thumb's on top. Don't just move your
Okay.
finger, your thumbs.
Yeah.
Move all the fingers. How does that feel?
It's awkward.
Awkward. It's weird, strange, wrong,
Yeah.
yucky, right? What does
Yeah.
your body want to do?
It wants to go back the other way.
So let it go back. How's that feel?
Better.
Better. Now that's why most people never achieve their goals, because they'd
So
rather be
true.
comfortable. I want to go back to the old way, which felt comfortable, than
Yeah.
be awkward for a while. But the
Yeah.
first time you do a podcast, the first time you ask someone for a favor, the first time you ask a big famous celebrity to be on your show, first time you give a speech, first time you ask a girl out for a date, all those things are awkward. They're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
First time I was a psychotherapist for a couple of years, and the first session I had with the person in my office, it was terrible. I think that's why they call it a private practice, because you're practicing in private. No one can see how bad you are.
Yeah.
Uh, but I got better. And the only way you can get better is to survive a risk. That's what builds confidence. Every time you do something and you survive it, you feel confident, more confident, more
Yeah.
confident. And eventually you feel like no big deal. So you have to be willing to go through the awkward stage. Little kids will do it. You take the computer, they'll go in there and do all kinds of stuff. 65-year-old, you're afraid to touch it,
Yeah.
because you're afraid you're going to screw it up. So we need to regain that willingness as a child to just fall down, make mistakes, and learn from them.
Yeah, that's so true. It's funny, I've almost done 200 episodes, but every single time, even coming into a conversation like this, I still have that nervous feeling.
Mhm.
And I think I'm starting to love that, because it just reminds me that I'm human, and I love that it's just excitement too.
I was going to say, it's
Yeah.
excitement. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's been times in the past I'm like, oh, I hope they cancel today, because I'm scared, because I have that fear, right? But
Right.
every single time I go through with it, I'm at the end, like, I just feel like, yes, that was such an awesome thing, because the old me would have probably thought of a reason to retreat or something. And now, just getting on calls and interviewing people and talking to them has just been like this, like, amazing build of confidence. Yeah, like, it's just completely changed the way I look, how I speak, and everything. And I haven't spoke on stage yet like yourself, but I can only imagine what that must do, and that thrill you must get every time. And that doesn't go away, but the butterflies, that excitement is great.
Yeah. One of the things I would recommend to you and anybody, anytime you're about to do something that's new and uncomfortable, I remember the first talk I gave to a national conference, and I was following a guy named, oh, what was his name? He wrote The Power of How to Make Friends and Influence People.
Oh
Don't
yeah.
Get Them Feel. It's a famous classic book.
Yeah.
And so it'd be like following, Barack Obama today or somebody. And I actually had to follow Bill Cosby once. That was a little intimidating. But I got up there and I said, well, that's the best warm-up act by a comedian I've ever had. Got a big laugh from the audience, made me feel better. But I remember I was going to speak to about 1,000 people at a conference of people who ran boys clubs. And so I went into the men's room and I went into a stall, didn't take my pants off or anything, but I sat down and I just closed my eyes and I visualized the audience giving me a standing ovation. And so now when I walked out on stage, I already had a standing ovation in my mind. So before you do anything new, just imagine doing it and getting the result you want, having, being comfortable, remembering all your lines, people laughing at your jokes, people coming up afterwards and congratulating you, getting a standing ovation, other people saying, wow, I want you to speak at my conference. What's your fee? People asking for your card, asking you to sign your book or your picture or whatever it is you're handing out. If you do that, we know the body can't tell the difference between a real event and a vividly imagined event. So literally you're rehearsing in your mind getting comfortable doing the thing you're afraid to do, such that after a while, you've done it so many times in your mind, it's like no big deal.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I wish I grew up playing hockey, pretty high level. And I used to have people talk about sports, visualization, before you get, when you're doing the breakout and what you're going to do. And I didn't really take it serious. But now I can see that the times where you have trouble, and the times that you may throughout, in there's certain ways, like when you're breaking out of your end, whatever sport you're in, that you may struggle with. And I struggled with breaking out of my end because I would have a guy coming at me and body checking me, and I'd always kind of worry because of a couple times I got hit with my head down.
Hmm.
So whenever I did rehearse that in my mind, when it happened, I would know what I was doing already.
Yes.
Like, but I resisted that, and I think a lot of people do. And I had talked about, imagine what it feels like to have your gear on, the sweat, like put yourself exactly in that position, and exactly the route that you got to take. And when I did it, it worked. But it's one of those things that, now talking about it again, I don't think a lot of people really value that enough to really put yourself in that exact feeling, and rehearse it over and over again. It's just
Yeah.
so powerful.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I was up in Canada doing a talk, and I saw an interview with the coach of the Calgary Stampede
Yeah.
football team, and he was talking about this guy who was dropping all his passes, he said to the guy after a while, he said, "When you go out there and you're about to run a pass pattern, what are you thinking?" He said, "I'm hoping I don't drop the ball." He said, "Well, what are you focused on?" "Dropping the ball." "What image comes into your mind?" "Dropping the ball." So what
Yeah.
the coach did is he made a video reel of his like 20 or 30 best catches ever. And he said, "I want you to watch this every day, at least 4 or 5 times." And now he started seeing himself catching the ball, catching the ball, catching the ball, catching the ball. And then he said, every time you go out there, imagine catching the ball. He did well. I was watching an interview with John Gordon, who wrote the book, The Energy Bus. And he was talking about this football player he was coaching. He was a field goal kicker, a place kicker. And he said the first year he did really, really well. And when he came to John, it was his second year, he wasn't doing well. And he said, "Well, what was it like your rookie year?" He said, "Oh my God, I'm living my dream. I'm doing everything I wanted to do." He said, "I'm so happy." He said, "So what changed?" He said, "Well, in the preseason, I missed a couple of kicks, and now I go out there and I don't want to let the coach down. I don't want to let the team down." So he's focusing on letting the team down, focusing on letting the coach down. So you always have to be focusing on what you want, not what you don't want. Because as soon as you're focused on
Ah,
what you don't want, that's what your mind is picturing. And we always create outwardly what we're picturing inwardly.
it's so true. Oh, I love that you brought that up. These are so many things that are just so important. And because, yeah, it's so easy to get caught up on what we don't want versus what we do want, and what can happen if we don't do the thing versus what can happen if we do the thing. You know,
Right. Right.
it's such a simple thing. And even how we speak to ourselves, I can't do this, instead of I can do this. I mean, why can't we? It's just the conversations with ourselves that stop us so many times.
Yeah. Somebody said the other day, I was listening to some, I've been on a lot of podcasts. I've been listening to some just because there's a lot of these summits going
Yeah.
on that people are doing, which is great because everyone's, trying to help people out right now. And he was talking about this guy who was the only person that's ever won. He's won 2 years in a row what are called a double triathlon, where you do a triathlon one day and you do another triathlon the next day, which is like almost inhuman.
That's crazy.
And what he said was it was different than everybody else. He said, "I learned not to listen to myself." He said, "Because if I listen to myself and saying, you can't do this, you're going to die, you're going to run out of energy, this is too hard on your body, whatever." He said, "Instead, I've learned to talk to myself. I encourage myself. I say, you can do this. This is possible, whatever." So the part of you that is your conditioning is going to tell you you can't do it. The part of you that is your grit, that is your encourager, that's your inner coach versus your inner critic, that's the part you want to identify with, take control of, and willfully, intentionally use in order to stimulate the response that you want. And most of us things like self-talk, we hear those phrases, but do you really take time to start being intentional about your self-talk? Reading books that are positive, so you start thinking that way.
Yeah.
Doing affirmations. A lot of people poo-poo affirmations as, new age gobbledygook, but it's true. Every thought you think is creating a vibration, is creating a biochemical reaction in your body.
Mm.
You can literally think yourself sick, or you can think yourself healthy. We see people that have spontaneous remissions. No one knows why. They started visualizing themselves happy, healthy. They started thinking healthy thoughts. They started using affirmations, etc. So it's so important to manage your states and manage your mind. And unfortunately, I don't know where you went to school, but where I went to school, there were no courses called self-science education, success 101, how to live a happy life, how to manage your states, how to manage money, relationships 101, all the things you really need for a happy life. I mean, when's the last time you needed the 5 causes of the Civil War, or the 3 exports of Brazil, or how to parse a sentence, or the
Trigonometry.
trigonometry? Exactly.
Man, I walked out of high school so confused. I didn't know how money worked. I didn't know how to do my taxes. I didn't know even just the basic life things. I felt lost. And
Yeah. Yeah, we don't
and
teach life skills. I mean,
no.
fortunately for me, people pay a lot of money to learn what they should have learned in school.
Yeah.
But the reality is, it's sad. I think we really should have an education that includes the things we're now doing online and in hotel rooms and so forth.
I agree. I just want to say thank you so much because I don't want to take up too much more of your time. This has been amazing, and I feel blessed to have you on the show. So thank you for taking the time to come and hang out with us, Jack.
My pleasure. Can I just tell everyone I've got this
Absolutely.
new book out. It's called The Success Principles Workbook. You can get
Absolutely.
it at all the usual places like Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com. However, if you'd like to get a bonus, which is an hour-and-a-half seminar with me, where instead of just kind of going all over the place, we methodically go through these principles so that you can actually begin to apply them. You go to the Success Principles Workbook.com/order, and it'll guide you through there to Amazon or Barnes and Noble Books and Million. But you'll get bonuses, one of which is this hour-and-a-half webinar I did recently, which is profound. We had about 5,000 people listen to it in the first couple of days, and I promise this, it'll change your life. It's about the cost of 4 cups of coffee at Starbucks, $20, and you can't go to Starbucks now anyway. So
Yeah.
spend it on something that will uplift you and get you into a place where your life will work a lot better than it has been.
Amazing. We'll have all the information in the show notes for everybody to check that out. I'm going to get one myself. Be crazy not to, you guys. I mean, I personally, just like we talked about, having that workbook is key for people like myself that can't comprehend reading as well. Like I have to do the exercises. So thank you
Right.
for creating that because that's super important.
My pleasure. My pleasure. It was
And
something I wanted to do, and I did it. So thank you.
awesome. Awesome. Where else can we check you out to make sure that we find you and
Just
explore anything you're up to?
just go to jackcanfield.com, just my name.com, and there's all the online courses we have, our Train the Trainer program, audio programs, just everything will support you. There's a lot of free resources as well, a lot of blogs and podcasts and things. So it's all there, jackcanfield.com.
Awesome. For the last question, what is one takeaway? What is takeaway for the audience? I always ask, what is one lesson that adversity has taught you?
I would say, having gone through so many adversities over the course of the years, that I can survive anything that ever happened to me. And that no matter what shows up, you have the capacity to handle it. I don't think the universe ever gives you something you can't handle. And I think the corollary of that is it doesn't give you a dream that you can't manifest. So if you feel a dream in your heart, I want you to know that you can achieve it. You may have to learn some new things. You may have to partner up with some people you haven't partnered up with yet. You may even need to get some certificate you don't have. But adversity will challenge you to bring forth your mastery. It will challenge you to develop high qualities like love, compassion, perseverance, courage, patience, things like that. Without those challenges, we can't develop strengths.
Love it. Wow. Thank you so much. Jam-packed hour full of value there, Jack. Thank you, man.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
The legendary Jack Canfield, everybody.